Throughout life, we cross paths with many people, and each of them leaves something behind in us, whether we realize it or not. Some enter our story and teach us what love truly feels like, showing us what it means to be seen, understood, and supported. These connections bring warmth, clarity, and a sense of belonging that nourishes who we are becoming. Yet others arrive with a very different purpose, one that is far less comfortable but just as important. They expose us to disappointment, to emotional fatigue, to the quiet ache of giving more than we receive. And still, even when the imbalance becomes obvious, we often find ourselves unable to walk away. Why is it so difficult to release someone who does not truly value us? Why do we hold on, even when a part of us already knows that the connection is draining us? Carl Jung suggested that the answer does not lie solely in the other person, but rather in what that relationship reflects within our own inner world. The unconscious mind operates through patterns, symbols, and repetitions, quietly shaping the experiences we attract and the roles we play within them. If you notice that you keep encountering similar relationship dynamics where you overgive and feel underappreciated, this is not simply bad luck. It is a reflection of something unresolved within you, something that continues to seek expression through your external reality. Holding on to someone who diminishes your sense of worth is not just an external situation, it is a psychological pattern. And letting go, therefore, is not just about removing a person from your life. It is a profound inner process, one that requires awareness, honesty, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Think back to the moments when you sensed deep inside that something was not right. Perhaps you noticed the imbalance, the lack of reciprocity, the subtle ways in which your needs were being ignored. Yet instead of stepping away, you stayed. You found reasons to justify their behavior, told yourself that things would improve with time, or believed that if you tried harder, they would finally recognize your value. But the truth is often more difficult to accept. The issue is not just what the other person does or fails to do, but what that dynamic awakens within you. Jung described how our most complex relationships often mirror what he called the shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves that we avoid confronting. The shadow is not something inherently negative, but when it remains unconscious, it influences our choices in ways we do not fully understand. If, deep within, you carry a belief that you must earn love, that your worth depends on proving yourself, then you may find yourself repeatedly drawn to situations that reinforce that belief. As Jung famously expressed, until you bring the unconscious into awareness, it will continue to direct your life, and you may mistake this repetition for fate. This is why the act of letting go holds such transformative power. The moment you decide to release what is clearly not aligned with your well-being, you begin to reclaim authorship over your own life. You step out of a pattern that once felt inevitable and recognize that you are not meant to struggle endlessly for affection or acceptance. Still, letting go is rarely easy. There is a natural resistance that arises when we consider leaving behind something familiar, even if that familiarity is painful. The human psyche tends to cling to what it knows because uncertainty feels threatening. The unknown carries no guarantees, and that can be frightening. Yet growth, as Jung emphasized, requires us to face what we would rather avoid. It asks us to move through discomfort rather than remain confined within it. Choosing to let go of someone who does not value you is, at its core, an act of self-respect. It is a quiet but powerful statement to yourself that you're no longer willing to participate in a dynamic that diminishes your sense of worth. It does not mean resentment, nor does it require anger toward the other person. Instead, it reflects a decision to step out of a narrative that was never truly meant for you. It creates space for new experiences, for connections that feel natural rather than forced, and for relationships in which you are appreciated without having to prove your value. As you begin to move forward, something subtle yet significant starts to shift within you. Your energy changes, and with that shift, the types of people and situations you encounter also begin to evolve. Jung referred to this phenomenon as synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences are not random, but connected to the inner state of the individual. When you release what is misaligned, you create the conditions for something more authentic to emerge. The unconscious mind is constantly communicating, offering signals that guide you toward what is right for you. However, we often ignore these signals because we have learned to rationalize our discomfort. We tell ourselves that love requires sacrifice, that struggle is part of the process, or that things will improve if we simply endure a little longer. But real connection does not demand constant effort to maintain its existence. It flows with a sense of mutual respect and ease. When you find yourself trying to convince someone to see your worth, it is often a sign that you're in the wrong place. Learning to trust your inner voice becomes essential. That quiet intuition you have silenced so many times already knows what you need. The question is whether you're willing to act on it. Ask yourself honestly what you deserve. If the answer includes respect, genuine care, and reciprocity, then your actions must begin to reflect that understanding. Letting go is not about loss. It is about aligning your life with those values. When you make this choice, a deeper transformation begins. You're no longer attempting to fit into a situation that does not accommodate who you are. You stop chasing fragments of attention from someone who cannot offer you more. And in that shift, something within you becomes clearer. Jung described this as the integration of the shadow, the process of bringing unconscious patterns into awareness. Once you recognize the part of yourself that was seeking validation in the wrong places, you are no longer controlled by it. Many people resist letting go because they believe they are losing something important. But it's worth asking how valuable something truly is if it consistently makes you feel inadequate. Jung suggested that much of our unnecessary suffering comes from our own attachment to what harms us. We remain because we fear what might come next, because the unknown feels more intimidating than the pain we already understand. The mind can create illusions that keep us trapped. It tells us that this relationship is all we have, that without it, we will be left with nothing, that no better alternative exists. But these thoughts are not objective truths. They are distortions shaped by fear and insecurity. They prevent us from stepping into a reality where something more aligned could take place. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes deeply relevant. Individuation is the process of becoming fully oneself, of recognizing that your identity and worth are not dependent on external validation. It is a journey toward authenticity, where you begin to understand that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you cultivate with yourself. And this journey cannot truly begin if you remain attached to something that continuously undermines your sense of self. It is striking how often we stay in one-sided relationships, holding on to the hope that the other person will eventually change. We imagine a future where they suddenly see us differently, where they recognize what we have been offering all along. But if you examine this desire closely, you may notice that it reflects a deeper longing within you. The need to be acknowledged by someone who does not truly appreciate you often points to an unresolved inner wound. Why do we seek validation from those who fail to give it? Why do we depend on another person's recognition to feel enough? Jung believed that many of these patterns originate in earlier experiences, where we learned to associate love with effort, with sacrifice, or with the need to prove ourselves. Perhaps at some point, we internalize the idea that love must be earned rather than freely given. Yet, genuine connection does not require suffering. The right person does not make you feel as though you must constantly fight for their attention or approval. If you're in a situation where you feel compelled to prove your worth again and again, it is a sign that the relationship does not align with who you truly are. Letting go, in this sense, is not just an emotional decision. It is a sign of psychological growth. It reflects a level of awareness where you recognize that your energy is valuable and that not everyone is entitled to it. Your time, your presence, and your care are meaningful, and they deserve to be shared in spaces where they are appreciated. Often, what keeps people stuck is the fear of being alone, but solitude is not the same as loneliness. Jung emphasized that the real danger lies not in being alone, but in being disconnected from oneself. You can be surrounded by others and still feel empty if there is no genuine connection within. On the other hand, when you develop a strong relationship with yourself, solitude becomes a space of clarity rather than isolation. From that place, relationships begin to change. They are no longer driven by need or dependency, but by conscious choice. You are with someone not because you fear being alone, but because you genuinely want to share your life with them. This shift transforms the entire dynamic of how you connect with others. Transformation truly begins when you shift your focus away from what you believe you have lost and start recognizing what you have gained. At first, letting go may feel like an unbearable rupture, as if something essential has been taken from you. But what if, in reality, it is not a loss at all, but the opening of a path that leads you closer to your authentic self? Jung often pointed out that every meaningful transformation is accompanied by inner tension, by a kind of psychological discomfort that signals growth. What you're experiencing is not a sign that something is wrong, but evidence that you are stepping beyond an emotional pattern that once defined you. When you remain attached to someone who does not value you, you unknowingly close yourself off from the possibility of something more aligned. As long as your energy is invested in a connection that drains you, there is little room for anything new to emerge. Letting go, therefore, is not simply an ending. It is a clearing, a necessary act that allows space for something different to enter your life. It is a declaration, whether conscious or not, that you are ready for relationships that reflect your true worth. One of the most common mistakes people make is waiting for the other person to change, believing that their own happiness depends on that transformation. But Jung emphasized that real change always begins within. Instead of hoping that someone else will suddenly recognize your value, the real shift occurs when you begin to recognize it yourself. And once that happens, your decisions naturally follow. You stop tolerating what once felt acceptable. You begin to close chapters that no longer align with who you are becoming. Interestingly, when you do this, the dynamics often change in unexpected ways. People who once overlooked you may suddenly notice your absence. Those who took your presence for granted may begin to see what they have lost. But at that point, something fundamental has shifted within you. Your focus is no longer on their recognition, but on your own growth. What once felt like a desperate need for validation becomes irrelevant because you are no longer seeking it from outside yourself. There is a quiet but powerful transformation that occurs when you release what was never meant to stay. New possibilities begin to unfold. Encounters that feel more genuine start to appear. And what once felt like an empty space gradually becomes filled with a sense of potential. Not because someone else rushed in to replace what you lost, but because you have learned to fill that space with something far more stable, your own self-respect, your own awareness, your own sense of inner alignment. Never underestimate the impact of a single decision. Choosing to let go is not just about ending a relationship, it is about stepping into a different version of yourself. A version that no longer accepts less than what it deserves. A version that does not beg for attention or affection. A version that understands its own value without needing constant reassurance. When you reach this point, life begins to mirror that understanding back to you. Still, it is natural for part of you to resist. The ego tends to cling to familiar narratives, even when they're painful. It holds on to what could have been, to imagine futures that never truly existed, to the hope that something might still change if you wait long enough. But time alone does not transform people. Change happens when there is intention, when there is awareness, when there is willingness. And if that willingness has not been present, waiting only prolongs your own suffering. Jung explained that attachment to a relationship that no longer serves us is not just about the bond itself. It reflects a deeper internal struggle, a belief that has been embedded within us over time. Often, that belief suggests that our worth is dependent on another person's presence, that without their recognition, we are somehow incomplete. But this belief is not a truth. It is a construct shaped by past experiences, one that can be questioned and ultimately released. Your value has never been determined by someone else's ability to see it. It has always existed within you, independent of external validation. The challenge is learning to recognize it for yourself, especially if you have spent a long time searching for it in the wrong places. Letting go is the moment when you begin to free yourself from that search. It is when you stop trying to prove your worth through effort, sacrifice, or persistence, and instead begin to acknowledge it from within. There is something deeply empowering about this shift. The energy that was once directed outward toward someone who could not reciprocate it begins to return to you. And as it does, your perspective changes. You start to see more clearly how much you had been compromising, how much you had been ignoring your own needs in order to maintain a connection that was never truly balanced. But beyond this realization, something else begins to emerge. You open yourself to new experiences. You become more receptive to people and situations that resonate with who you are now, rather than who you were when you were still holding on. This is where synchronicity becomes visible again, not as a mysterious force, but as a reflection of your internal alignment with your external reality. There is no greater act of strength than recognizing when something no longer belongs in your life and having the courage to step away. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but MTVKH clarity. Letting go is not a passive surrender. It is an active choice, a decision to prioritize your well-being over familiarity, your growth over comfort, your truth over illusion. And yes, it can be painful. It means saying goodbye to something you once believed in, to a connection in which you invested time, energy, and hope. But that pain is not permanent. What remains is the sense of relief that comes from no longer carrying what was weighing you down. The quiet peace that replaces the constant tension. The lightness that follows when you're no longer trying to sustain something that does not flow naturally. In this process, you rediscover yourself. You realize that being alone does not have to mean feeling empty. You begin to understand that your sense of completeness does not depend on another person's presence. It comes from within, from the relationship you cultivate with yourself. And once that relationship becomes strong, everything else begins to shift. You no longer settle for less than what aligns with your values. You no longer tolerate dynamics that diminish your sense of self. You are no longer driven by the fear of being alone, because you have learned that being disconnected from yourself is far more limiting than being without someone else. This is the essence of letting go. It is not just about releasing another person. It is about releasing the version of yourself that believed you had to struggle for love. Jung reminded us that the most important relationship we will ever have is the one we have with ourselves. When that relationship is grounded in awareness and respect, everything else becomes clearer. You no longer chase what is not meant for you, because you understand that what truly aligns with you will not require force or exhaustion. Letting go, then, is not an act of defeat. It is an act of courage. It is the willingness to step into uncertainty with the trust that what lies ahead is more aligned than what you're leaving behind. It is the recognition that self-love is not just an idea, but something expressed through your decisions, through the boundaries you set, and through the standards you uphold in your relationships. When you finally choose yourself, something profound shifts within you. The energy that was once tied to struggle begins to free itself. The weight you had been carrying starts to dissolve, and in that moment, you realize that it was never the relationship itself that defined you. It was the belief that you needed it in order to feel complete. The fear of letting go often comes from the assumption that nothing better will come along. But the truth is quite the opposite. When you release what does not value you, you create space for what truly does. Life responds to the energy you embody. When you operate from fear and lack, you tend to attract more of the same. But when you begin to move from a place of self-worth and clarity, the experiences you encounter begin to reflect that shift. This is not about blaming the other person or holding on to resentment. It is about understanding that not everyone is meant to stay in your life, and that is perfectly natural. Some people are part of your journey only for a certain period, bringing lessons that help you grow. And once those lessons are integrated, holding on no longer serves a purpose. There comes a moment when you can no longer ignore what you feel deep inside. That quiet voice, the one that has been guiding you all along, becomes impossible to silence. And when you finally choose to listen to it, everything begins to change. You start making decisions that align with your truth rather than your fears. It is natural to feel sadness when something ends. It is human to reflect on what could have been. But do not allow yourself to become trapped in that reflection. Instead, turn your attention toward what you can create moving forward. Every ending carries within it the possibility of a new beginning, one that is shaped by the awareness you have gained. Letting go does not mean erasing the past. It means learning from it without remaining attached to it. It means choosing peace over attachment, clarity over confusion, growth over stagnation. And over time, what once felt like a painful loss reveals itself as a necessary step toward something more fulfilling. If you look back on your life, you may notice a pattern. Each time you released something that no longer aligned with you, something else eventually took its place. It may not have happened immediately, and the transition may have required patience. But in the end, it led you to a place that felt more authentic. And this moment is no different. Trust the process. Trust your intuition. Trust that what is meant for you will not require you to question your worth. Do not be afraid to close a door that no longer brings you peace, because in doing so, you are opening yourself to everything that truly belongs in your life. When you finally make the conscious decision to stop investing your energy in what does not appreciate you, something within you stabilizes. The peace you were searching for outside begins to emerge from within. And in that realization, you understand one of Jung's most profound insights, that the quality of your relationships is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. If you have held on to someone who could not value you, it does not mean you are flawed. It simply means there was a part of you that had not yet fully recognized its own worth. But now, with this awareness, you have the opportunity to choose differently. You have the ability to move forward with clarity, with strength, and with a deeper understanding of who you are. Letting go is not just about freeing the other person, it is about freeing yourself. It is about releasing the expectation that someone else must complete you. It is about reclaiming your energy and directing it toward your own growth. And as you do that, everything begins to transform. You no longer approach love from a place of need, but from a place of abundance. You no longer fear being alone because you realize that you have always had yourself. And from that place, the connections you form become more meaningful, more balanced, and more aligned with your true nature. This is the essence of the journey, a return to yourself, a recognition that you are already whole. And from that wholeness, you begin to create a life that reflects the love, respect, and authenticity you have chosen to embody.